I'm building a custom model railroad station platform for my passenger station scene. This is going to be a fun kit bash, so let's do this on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things. I've been building out a passenger station scene to represent Central Station in Fort Worth, Texas, and I needed a platform that resembles this one with the brick walkways and the wing walls and such. Well, there's no such kit that I could find on the in-scale market currently, but I did find a Walthers kit that would make a great starting point for this, and so I'm going to kit bash it into a unique custom model that would represent this platform well. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it step by step. So let's head over to the workbench and get started. This video is brought to you by Midwest Model Railroad. With 15,000 square feet of inventory and one-day shipping, whether in person or online, they are your one-stop model railroad shop. MidwestModelRR.com, link in the description. My project begins with this Walthers kit, the butterfly-style station platforms in N-scale. This is a pretty simple design, but it's perfect for the basis for my custom platform. This kit comes with enough parts to build 8 platform sections, each one 6 inches long, but for my scene, I only need 3 of these sections. I began by cutting out the parts for the needed sections from the sprue with my flush cutting tweezers. Each section consists simply of a floor, a roof, and 4 support columns. There are also supplied trim pieces for the ends of the platform roof, but my prototype didn't have such trim, so I left them out. I used some fine sanding sticks to sand and polish away the injection gates from the parts before beginning assembly. Extra care was needed when sanding the support columns as they're somewhat delicate. I friction fit the support columns into the base without glue, then turned them upside down to cement the columns to the roof sections. I did this on one section at a time, creating 3 separate platform sections at the start. It was important for later steps that I be able to remove the support columns and roof assembly from the base. When this cement had dried, I cemented 3 base sections together to create a single 18-inch long platform floor. Except where otherwise noted, all of the glue joints in this project were made with solvent cement. With the floors cemented together, I repeated the process with the roof sections. Now it was time for the customization of the platform. You will note that the platform consists of panels of brick pavement bordered with strips of concrete. To model this, I cut strips of 20 thousandths inch thick styrene 4 scale feet wide and glued them down the middle of the platform. I cut these from large sheets of 20 thousandths of an inch thick styrene that I keep on hand. I've been asked a few times recently where to purchase larger sheets of styrene like this, so I'll post a link to this in my Amazon Pick of the Week in the description down below if you'd like to check it out. I'll also post links to my flush cutting tweezers and solvent cement if those will be helpful to you as well. I then used strips of evergreen scale models number 122, 20 thousandths of an inch by 40 thousandths of an inch strip along the edges. I left these slightly long on the ends and then cut and sanded them flush when the glue had set. I used the same strip to trim across the ends of the platform. I needed to reproduce the mounting slots for the support columns in the styrene strip that I had just added, so I turned the base upside down and used the largest micro drill bit that would fit into the original slot. I then drilled a hole in the styrene at each end of the mounting slot. I turned the base over and used a new sharp number 11 hobby blade to carve open the slot between the holes and to shape the ends until the support posts fit properly. I had to repeat this process 12 times, one for each column. I tried to leave each column fitting snugly in these slots. When I had all the slots made, I checked the roof assembly to make sure everything fit properly. For all of the brick in this project, I used JTT's number 97421 TT scale brick sheet. This product is styrene and matches the thickness of the 20,000ths of an inch strip that I installed earlier. I took a careful, accurate measure of the width of the sections that I needed for the platform, then transferred that onto the sheet and cut a long strip. For best results when cutting brick sheet, make sure your straight lines follow one mortar joint and be sure the brick is oriented in the correct direction for the part that you're cutting. I checked the strip to make sure the width was correct. If it's slightly wide, that's okay, as you can sand the individual sections for a perfect fit. There will be concrete border sections that extend across the platform between each of these pads at each support column. So I measured the length of brick section I would need, taking those concrete strips into consideration. I cut the first section to length manually using a square. I then checked its size. I cut the concrete cross pieces out of evergreen number 125, 20,000ths by 1/10 of an inch strip, and cemented the first pair in place using my square to keep them straight. The end sections of brick are smaller due to the distance between the end support column and the end of the platform, so I cut these sections to fit. I then used my chop it for the length of the main brick sections. I cut each one to length and checked it, sanding each one for a perfect fit. When I had cemented the first pair of brick pads in place, I cut the cross pieces to length and cemented them in place, making sure they were centered with the support columns. I worked my way down the platform like this, cutting, checking, and cementing one section at a time. I needed a little more height for the platform to match the rail height and the level of the street along the front of the platform, so I used some 40,000ths of an inch styrene to raise the entire platform a scale 6 inches. I cemented the platform to the styrene, and when it had time to partially cure, I scored along the edge of the platform and carefully snapped it off. It took 2 strips of this styrene to raise the entire platform, with a small scrap to be cut off of the end. When the shim layer was fit properly, I made sure it was cemented securely all the way around the perimeter of the platform. Next, I needed to build the wing walls that divide the platform at every support column. This would be the most involved part of the project, as each wall has a beige block base, a tall brick section, and a beige capstone. The textured sheet I used for the block and the brick were only textured on one side, so I would need to cut 2 pieces for each wall and cement them back to back to get the texture on both sides. There were a total of 24 wing walls, 2 at each of the 12 support columns. Thus, the entire project would consist of 108 individual custom-cut pieces. I started by cutting a piece of scrap styrene to the overall size of the walls to test the size and fit. The total height of the walls would be a scale 10 feet, 7 feet of brick, 2.5 feet of block at the bottom, and a 6-inch capstone at the top. I started by cutting a strip of brick at 7 scale feet. I then used my chop it to cut it into 4 scale feet wide wall sections, 48 of them in all. I cemented pairs of these brick sections back to back with solvent cement. The chop it doesn't reproduce the size as perfectly as you would like, so I made sure that one side and the bottom of these wall pairs were flush for now. When the cement had set, I used the chop it again and a sanding stick to flush up the other 2 sides of the wall sections. I created the capstones using evergreen scale models number 143, 40,000ths by 60,000 strip cut to 4 scale feet lengths. I then cemented the capstones to the top of the brick wall sections. There's some intentional overhang of the capstone, and I left all of the overhang on one side of the wall, flushing up the back so it will fit flat against the support columns of the platform. I worked on a piece of waxed paper taped to my work surface so as not to glue any of my parts to my cutting mat accidentally. The solvent and the styrene do not adhere to the wax paper nearly as quickly as to the cutting mat. Let me pause for a moment to say that if you're enjoying this video and would like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques to help you build a better model railroad, then be sure to subscribe down below and click the little bell icon so you can catch future videos. To create the block sections at the bottom of the wing walls, I used N-Scale Architects number 50057 concrete block sheet for N and Z scales. This product is different from the brick sheet I used in that it appears to be vacuum formed from styrene foil, meaning it has the correct texture on one side and a negative of the texture on the back side. I was concerned about how this would work in my application, but it turned out working and looking great. Again, I cut a strip of the block sheet to the height I needed, in this case a scale 2.5 feet tall. Once again, make sure you are cutting the sheet with a block in the correct orientation. I decided it would be easiest to apply a base coat of paint to these strips before I cut them to length since they were so small. I used Tamiya XF55 Deck Tan for the block and capstone color. In this case, I painted it on full strength with a brush to get good primer type coverage. When the paint was dry to the touch, I cut the block into 4 scale foot lengths and cemented them back to back as I had the brick. To work with these very small pieces, I used a loop of painter's tape on my work surface to hold them in place. The solvent cement did mess up the paint a bit, but I was planning to paint a second coat anyway, so it wasn't a problem in the long run. As with the brick, the block pieces didn't all match up perfectly, so I again trimmed and sanded these after the cemented set to make them flush all the way around. All of these steps were just very repetitive because there were so many sections to create. When cementing the brick and block sections together, I taped a scrap of wood to my work surface to give me something to push the parts together against as I glued them. I made sure the 2 sections that I cemented together were flat and straight. When that cement had set, I sanded the edges of the assembled walls to make sure that they were straight and flush. When finished with this step, I had 24 completed wall sections ready to install. But before installation, I needed to do some painting. Off camera, I painted the top and bottom of the roof flat white. The plastic itself was a light gray color, so I sprayed a light coat and left it a bit uneven intentionally. This will all blend together in the weathering step in a few moments. Next, I masked the underside of the roof so I could paint the support columns. Simple painter's tape worked fine for this application. The important thing is to burnish the tape into the grooves of the details along the roof edges. I then took the model to my spray booth and painted the columns with Tamiya XF64 Red Brown. Here I used a mixture of about 1 part paint to 9 points isopropyl alcohol that built up the color slowly in layers, repeating until I was happy with the coverage. When dry to the touch, I removed the mask. Then I weathered the canopy starting with the underside using dark gray and brown paints from Vallejo. For this step, I wet the model, thinned the paint to a wash consistency, dabbed it lightly onto the model, and let physics do the work. I wanted a lightly weathered look, showing small amounts of rust and grime. There were a few spots on the underside where the masking tape took bits of the white paint off, but with the gray plastic showing underneath, it only enhanced the weathering look. Also, the underside of this platform will be very hard to see. I repeated the process on the top side. Next, I weathered the brick walkways using dark gray Vallejo paint. This step was primarily to bring out the detail between the brick, which is dark because there's no mortar between the bricks on the walkways. I first tried to mask a section and weather it, but this didn't work very well, so I simply carefully freehanded the rest of it. When the weathering was dry, I touched up areas where the brick surface was too dark by dry brushing it with Vallejo Cavalry Brown. When that layer was all dry, I painted the concrete areas with Vallejo Cement Gray. This paint doesn't cover bare plastic very well in one coat, so I ultimately applied 3 coats in all. making sure the final coat had the brush strokes going across the sections in the direction that I would want any strike pattern in the concrete to be. I also painted the edges of the platform the same color. I touched up any brick that needed it with Cavalry Brown. The edge of the platform that would face the tracks got a strip of Tamiya flat yellow for a safety stripe. Returning to the wing walls, I touched up the paint of the block parts and painted the edges of the walls with Tamiya Deck Tan and Vallejo Cavalry Brown. I carefully hand-painted the capstones the same color. I used a wash of Vallejo Cement Gray to produce mortar lines in the walls. This treatment needed to be applied to both sides of the walls. When all the paint was dry, I installed the canopy to the roof platform, making sure the columns were completely seated in their mounting slots. I then began mounting the wing walls. Since all of the parts are painted, I glued them in place with tacky glue, a PVA product that is thick when applied but dries clear. A solvent cement would have destroyed the paint. One wing wall goes on each side of each support column. The walls are the same width as the concrete strip down the middle of the platform, so I simply centered them on that strip. I took care to make sure that each pair of walls were in line with one another and standing up straight. It was here that the platform really began to take on the character of the prototype and look like a unique custom model. The street along the platform is a drop-off and pickup lane with brick crosswalks that would lead to the station if that building were modeled. It is built of the same brick sheet that I used previously, with 20,000 styrene for the concrete portion to the street. I masked off the brick sections and airbrushed the concrete sections with a 50-50 mixture of Tamiya Gray and Deck Tan, and then that paint was thinned about 1 part paint to 10 parts IPA. I applied the paint in several light passes. When dry to the touch, I removed the masking tape and then weathered the brick as I had done before with the brick walks, using a wash of dark gray Vallejo paint. I couldn't stop the wash from wicking onto the concrete portions, so I partially weathered them while I was at it. I'll work more on the weathering and final look of this street when I paint and weather the other streets in the scene. The scene as a whole still needs a lot of work, but I'm really pleased with this custom platform. With some additional details and figures, it's really going to look fantastic. And to see how I build the rest of this scene and other model railroad content, check out the links on your screen. Don't forget my Amazon picks of the week and other valuable links in the description down below, and join me for future installments as I bring you even more great model railroad videos, and I'll see you on the next video. 10, Lizzie?